Hello, hello, hello. So this is Dagon H.P. Lovecraft story. I haven't touched it. I haven't started it. I haven't looked at any gameplay of this. Just looked really interesting. Figured I'd give it a shot. Nice and short, nice and sweet. Go ahead and get into it. Dagon is a faithful interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot. Okay, like that.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
During the game, you will encounter interactive elements. I got circles, I got question marks. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the Elder sign, because that's the Elder sign over here. You can also access all of the found facts later. All right, cool. Oh, circle.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Okay.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate.
Okay, so we're addicted to morphine. Great.
When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
So, got morphine. Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War and World War I. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Friedrich Serturner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagen was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. Okay? So I'm guessing we'll have to remember that. Civil War, World War I, sold without restrictions until 1914. Okay. All right.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
Okay. Naval prisoners. The Huns. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on 27th of July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves. One that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention in 1899. Okay. They called them Huns.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Okay, when we get in the boat, take this stuff with me.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings.
We've left the boat, our little dinghy here.
Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept.
The change?
Its details I shall never know. For my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Ew?
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
The Origins of Dagen. Dagen seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Urban S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean, and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl, and can yet feel the ooze sucking me down. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells, in his own words. I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. The Dweller in Darkness, 1927. He doesn't like the sea, and kind of describes why.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position.
Ew.
Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might.
Okay. So he can't hear the ocean. Feels like we're very far away from it.
Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
Those marks. Oh, yeah, it is. Volcanic eruptions sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transient and erode after some time, but some prove permanent. The floating pumice can move across long distances and transport barnacles and macroalgae that cling to it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga eventually reached Australia. Cool. Pretty cool.
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
So we're gonna walk through the nasty ickiness. Okay. Oh god, I'm just imagining the sound. Is it gonna make the sound of him walking through this gunk?
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
Marks anywhere? Nope. Ugh. Oh god.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
Alright, hold on. What the hell is that? That's not a sea creature. Get out of here. Just making this stuff up now. Seriously, what the hell is that? I don't know what that is. Ugh. My mud. Trivia stuff. No? We'll just keep walking in the... Ugh. Okay. That's a whale. Okay, those exist. But are these crabs? Giant crab legs? Pretty gross.
That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
The hummock. The mountain thing I can trivia around. Anything hidden in the muck? Maybe? You. The horrors of the ocean. The creator of the Cthulhu Mythos and the fictional underwater city of, I'm going to say this wrong, R'lyeh, was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today, we know that the darkest depths of the ocean are home to many peculiar organisms. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the Mariana snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, that's 26,000 feet below the ocean's surface, in never-ending darkness and at hellishly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep-sea creatures such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it's hard not to find some irony in this. Yeah, very true. Giant squids didn't think they existed for the longest time, and yet here we have. I mean, not these, but we know they exist now.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
Okay, gonna just look for any clues, or am I just moving? Oh, there it is. The loner. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias and resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visible in the background and piles of papers scattered across the floor. So to make his work better, he pretended that he was a loner, a shut-in. Okay.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
Yeah, I'd say that's a valley. That's a void.
Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
Oh, so we're actually going to do this. We're going to climb down this. Okay.
Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
Yeah, that's a box, my dude. It's a tower of some sort. There. Go towards it.
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty jarring. Climbed a mountain, came down into a giant valley, and there's a looks like a halo tower.
For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
Okay. Examine our surroundings. At my feet, shark-looking rock. That looks like a shark. See, like the eye? Little fin back there. Okay. Can't reach it though. Guess just forward is the way to go.
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm.
Okay. Definitely got runes on it.
And revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
Yeah, it's got writing and stuff on it. That's cool. Is this one of those curiosity killed the cat moments? He just wants to draw nearer to it, and we're gonna find out it's this monstrosity inside. Find out.
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like.
Got turtles. Got crabs. I see a crab. Got a nautilus down here. Little nautilus there. Sharks. Shark there. Shark. Seahorse.
Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagen contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and character notes, the shadow out of time, the haunter of the dark, islands emerging from the ocean, the call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies, Migo and the Whisperer in Darkness. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu Mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. Okay. All right, sounds cool. And I guess that's Cthulhu right there.
Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men.
Probably not us. Probably a different kind of man.
Though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto.
Mermen? Kinda?
Or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
Oh, yikes. Some ugly dudes.
They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall.
Didn't this guy just say he wasn't going to tell us about their features, and now he's telling us precisely about their features and then saying he's not going to tell us anything else? Okay.
Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself.
So these dudes are enormous. Okay.
I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe.
Let's be real. He doesn't look like he's killing that whale. It looks like he's dancing with that whale. Like he's chatting that whale up. And the other whales, those are the sad chud whales that this whale has already rejected. And he's like, "Yo, check out my bulging eyes and my flabby lips."
Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares.
What the hell?
About which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds.
Yeah, I think I'd pass out
I
too.
went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
I don't think I can blame the guy. He just saw like big ass Ninja Turtle hop out and start praying to the giant monolith.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
Okay.
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital.
Hospital looks like shit.
Brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention.
Where's my body? I'm just a I'm just a head laying on a pillow. I need to plaster that wall.
Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Okay. Little suspicious of the. I guess those are like tentacles hanging out of the ceiling. Maybe those are wires. Look around. See, here's something. The journalist. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again, for the first time since his teenage years. Dagen, published in 1917, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments, and at the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is or can ever be above warfare until the basic impulses of the human animal should have miraculously changed. Sounds about right. Oh, and I'm psychic now. I can just open a door with my mind.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Dagon the fish god. Dagon was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem and an underworld prison warden in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Anything else we can look at in here? Okay, the Order of Dagen.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
The Marketer. Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine, where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the unusual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark on the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. He wrote an ad. Okay. August Derleth and the Cthulhu Mythos. August Derleth was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu Mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu Mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. Okay. Kind of hijacked his idea and formed it into something he wanted it to be, I guess. Me back, okay. Why are you looking at me? You're looking at me. The Scientist. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagen was published, it was subject to a wide debate. After the author used it in the story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted, in defense of Dagen, that if Dagen were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender specific, indicating that science was an endeavor to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. Okay, man of science.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
So he's written down everything he saw in his visions and everything that happened, and now he's going to off himself. Okay. Lovecraft on tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco. Even though he used to smoke when he was 12 in order to look and feel like an adult, in his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown, dated 13th of February, 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to. Having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate nature, equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition, the prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as of any other. Okay, he didn't like tobacco and he didn't like drinking. Wonder how he felt about morphine.
Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
A lot of Godzillas. That's what it looks like. It looks like a lot of Godzilla backs swimming to shore.
The end is near.
Ugh. Ew. Like that sound. The squishy stomp.
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
Oh, the door's bulging out. Other tidbits.
It shall not find me.
Think it shall.
God, that hand! The window! The window!
So he overdosed on morphine and then jumped out the window. All right. Well, that was a nice little story. I feel like even without the animation and the visual aspect of it, the words, the way he put words together, and he didn't use a whole lot of big fancy words, but kind of interlaced them in. Vivid descriptions made it you see on the screen exactly what you were thinking when you read what he wrote. I like it. I think it's really good. Hope anybody seeing this enjoys. Definitely give it a look. Maybe try some of the DLC out. And I'm probably gonna be looking for some more Lovecraftian games because the Mythos, even though I know he doesn't want it to be called that, it's interesting. It's very complex. It's got a lot of depth to it.